You may have faced some situations that are different to you. This is not something that only happens to you. It is normal and happens to everyone. Sadly, we tend to think that life should be full of only happy and enjoyable moments, fooling ourselves and creating a false reality. However, at some point, we will encounter situations that stress us to our limits. On the bright side, as human beings, we have the ability to adjust our emotions to some extent and manage hard situations with more effectiveness and less suffering. Despite having this capacity as humans, it doesn't mean it's an easy task. Throughout life, no one teaches us how to properly cope with our emotions, and that's why I'm making this video. Today, I will talk about temperance, one of the 4 historical virtues. To do this, I will tell you a story. Once a king instructed the wise men of his court to design a precious ring with a diamond from one of the finest jewelers in the region. He wanted to hide some words inside the ring that could help him in tough times, a message he could read in times of despair. Moreover, he wished this message to benefit his future heirs and the children of his heirs. However, the message had to be small enough to fit on the diamond of his ring. All those who heard the king's wishes were great wise scholars who could have written long treatises, but having a message that consisted of only 2 or 3 words and fit on a diamond ring was a hard task. Nevertheless, they thought and searched in their philosophical books for many hours, yet found nothing that suited the powerful king's desires. The king had a beloved servant, a man who had also served his father and cared for him when his mother died. He was treated as family and respected by all. For these reasons, the king consulted him too. The servant said, "I am not a sage, nor a scholar, nor an academic, but I know the message. As you know," he continued, "during my long life in the palace, I have met all kinds of people. On one occasion, I met a master who was a guest of your father. I was at his service, and when he left, I accompanied him to the door to thank him. As a gesture of gratitude, he gave me this message." At that moment, the elderly servant wrote the mentioned message on a tiny piece of paper, folded it, and handed it to the king, saying, "Do not read it now. Keep it hidden in the ring and open it only when you find yourself in a situation with no way out." It didn't take long for that moment to arrive. The country was invaded, and his kingdom was threatened. He fled on horseback to save his life, while his enemies followed him. He was alone, and the followers were many. At one point, he arrived at a place where the path ended, and before him there was a cliff and a deep valley. Falling would be fatal. And he couldn't turn back because the enemy blocked his path. He could hear the horses' hooves, the voices, and the nearness of the enemy. It was then that he remembered the ring. He took out the paper, unfolded it, and found a tremendously valuable message for that moment. It simply said, "This too shall pass." At that moment, he realized that a profound silence enveloped him. The pursuers apparently had gotten lost in the forest or had taken the wrong path. But the fact was that immense silence surrounded him. He no longer heard the horses' hooves. The king felt deeply grateful to the servant and the unknown master. Those words had been miraculous. He folded the paper, put it back in the ring, gathered his army, and reconquered his kingdom. On the day of victory, there was a grand celebration in the city with music and dance, and the king felt very proud of himself. At that moment, once again, the elderly servant at his side said, "Dear king, it is time for you to read the message in the ring." "What do you mean?" asked the king. "Now I am experiencing a situation of euphoria and joy. People celebrate my return. We have defeated the enemy." The servant replied, "This message is not only for desperate situations, but also for joyful ones. It is not just for when you feel defeated, but also when you feel victorious. It is not just for last moments, but also for first ones." The king opened the ring and read the message. "This too shall pass." Once again he felt peace within himself amidst all noise from people celebrating around him. But pride and ego had vanished. The king fully understood the message. The bad is as transient as the good. The elderly servant continued, "Remember that everything passes. No event or emotion is permanent. Just like day and night, There are moments of joy and moments of sorrow. Accept them as part of the duality of nature because they are the very nature of things. One of the keys to mastering our emotions is to understand and remember that what we are feeling at this moment will not last forever. Do you know anyone who has never experienced happiness or someone who has never felt sadness? In both cases, those emotions do not last permanently throughout life. Good and bad things happen. When going through a sad moment, it helps to accept and understand that sadness will pass. Acceptance is not resignation, passivity, or agreement with what is happening. It is simply acknowledging that many things that happen to us are beyond our control. Acceptance leads us to proactivity, making us aware of whether we can do something or change our situation. In that case, all our energy and intention should be directed towards that goal. When we accept something, we are more capable of moving forward. Similarly, we shouldn't get carried away in moments of happiness. It's fine to enjoy them, but in moderation, without letting the euphoria make us forget that those moments will also pass. People who forget this are never prepared to face difficult situations in life. They live in a bubble that will eventually burst. Stoicism teaches us to enjoy the moment but never forget the reality of life. Just as we suffer in difficult situations but do not let ourselves be consumed by uncontrolled sadness, this is temperance. The story I mentioned earlier only addresses two emotions, joy and sadness. However, temperance is applicable to any emotion. No emotion becomes positive when taken to the extreme. On the other hand, practically any emotion, when managed in moderation, can bring something positive. Even negative emotions, when controlled with temperance, allow us to obtain valuable lessons for our lives. In the words of Seneca, temperance is a virtue that consists of mastering and moderating impulses and desires, so that they do not lead us to excess or deficiency. In the words of Epictetus, temperance is a pleasing harmony of feelings resulting from a life in which desires are controlled and reason is the guide. And in the words of Marcus Aurelius, temperance is the virtue that helps us govern and direct our passions and desires, avoiding extremes and maintaining a balanced and moderate life.